status conditions. We all know the main ones. You have sleep, burn, poison, bad poisoning, paralysis, and freeze. And outside of freeze, which doesn't have a straight up method of inflicting, these are all commonly seen and used in competitive play. But there are more status inflictions in Pokemon than you may think. You know, ones that aren't permanent that can do things like limit your move choices or cause passive damage, but are removed when the affected Pokemon switches out. You might immediately think of Confusion and Infatuation, as they are often associated with the other status conditions, and they will be included, but there are a surprising amount of these, and unlike status conditions like Burn and Sleep, most of these can stack and be inflicted on the same mon at once. Today we're going to cover all of these, and as a little bonus, I'm going to rank their effects based on usefulness in competitive gameplay. We are limiting this to moves inflicted by an opposing Pokemon. No self-procs like the Glaive Rush effect, no field conditions, so the pledge moves won't be here. This is my criteria of considering it a pseudo-status condition. Let's get into it. We'll start with a great one in Taunt. The Taunt condition can only be caused by the move Taunt targeted towards a Pokemon. It forces a user to only use attacking moves for 3 turns. This can even hit behind substitutes and force the inflicted target to miss their current turn if they click the status move while acting after getting taunted in the same turn. A Pokemon with no attacking moves or one choice into a status move will be forced to struggle if not swapped out. Like a few we'll cover on this list, this status can be cured with a Mental Herb and is directly blocked by abilities like Aroma Veil and Oblivious. Taunt is a great tool often run competitively to shut down support and set up Pokemon. Its effect puts it in the A tier for me. The next condition to cover is Heal Block. The Heal Block condition can be caused by the move Heal Block itself, but now can also be caused by the attack Psychic Noise. This effect prevents the inflicted Pokemon from healing through any means. This includes healing through moves, items, abilities, grassy terrain, draining moves, and whatever else I forgot to mention. This effect was rarely used competitively when Heal Block was the only way to inflict it, as it wasn't really worth the move slot, but it being a secondary effect to the solid attacking move Psychic Noise saves it a bit and brings it from a D to a C rating for me. Another condition that can be inflicted through an attacking move is Throat Chop. This effect is actually only able to be inflicted from this move. It prevents the inflicted mon from using sound-based moves for 2 turns. This can stop a sound-based move on the turn it's used, meaning your opponent's selected sound move will fail if you Throat Chop them before they move. This effect is alright, but super situational, and the short length that it lasts while requiring the use of Throat Chop over the much preferred Knockoff or Crunch makes it not too meaningful competitively. I will put this one in the D tier for usefulness. Next I have one you should all be familiar with. This is the Confusion status effect. It definitely has the most moves and abilities that interact with it, since it's been around since Generation 1. Confusion gives the affected Pokemon a 33% chance to hit themselves on their turn instead of using their selected move. This can be directly inflicted by moves like Confuse Ray and Swagger, while being a secondary effect on a lot of attacks like Hurricane and Strange Steam. Confusion is definitely not a condition you can rely on competitively, especially since it's nerfed from a 50% chance to hit yourself to 33% starting in Generation 7, but as a secondary effect, it provides a great deterrent effect that is really annoying to deal with, as not many Pokemon will want to lose a turn from a self-hit in Confusion. I'll give Confusion a B for potentially being able to swing matchups via hacks. Next up might be my favorite condition in Curse. The Curse effect is caused when a Ghost type uses the move Curse. The user of the move loses 50% of their max HP and places a curse on the target. This causes them to lose 25% of their max HP per turn as long as they're active. It's a pretty solid effect that can be used to beat a Pokemon with recovery spam, force a switch, and even give you switch initiative by KOing yourself while laying the curse. It isn't a super common competitive move to see on Ghost types, but I still really like the effect and could be solid in non-Nuzlocke playthroughs as well. So I'm gonna put it in C tier for usefulness, but it definitely gets an A for cool in my book. Speaking of Ghost types, they can't be inflicted by our next condition, Trapping. Trapping, or Escape Prevention, is a condition that has a lot of ways to inflict. Moves like Mean Look, Block, Octolock, and Spiderweb will prevent the target from swapping out. Abilities like Shadow Tag prevent Pokemon from switching, along with Arena Trap and Magnet Pull to a lesser extent. There's trapping attacks like Infestation and Magma Storm that trap the target, but those will get their own segment. For this, I'm looking at the actual effect of trapping and being unable to swap. It is a huge advantage to have since you severely limit your opponent's options. Obviously, this has varying effectiveness, as trapping status moves aren't very viable compared to abilities that provide the effect just by swapping in. There are also self-inflicted trapping moves like Ingrain, No Retreat, and Jaw Lock that trade benefits for not being able to switch. This is a very influential effect in competitive Pokemon, and I think just by overall merit of the abilities that get banned for being stupidly broken, I have to put this one in S tier. The bound condition is pretty similar to the trapping condition, but technically they're considered different since you can trap without bounding your opponent. Bounding or binding? I don't know. This condition traps the user for 4 to 5 turns when using a binding move like Wrap or Fire Spin. This causes chip damage at the end of each turn and has a couple items that interact with the condition to extend the length or damage. It is different from trapping as it has a set duration before the opposing Pokemon is freed. The trapping attacks do see some decent play, mostly due to the passive damage that they inflict, as they can help mons like Heatran beat mons they shouldn't like Toxapex, or allow you to set up on a passive mon or Perish Trap them. It's also worth noting that ghost types can't be trapped by these moves either, but they will still receive the chip damage at the end of each turn that they stay in. So it does have that additional benefit over regular trapping. Overall, they are pretty weak attacks outside of a couple signature moves, so there are more built for certain trapping strategies or on more passive mods who benefit more from the chip damage. I will send this one to the B tier for usefulness competitively. Infatuation is one of the more popular conditions, but although it is known, it doesn't mean it's good. The actual effect it has is pretty solid though. Infatuation can be caused by the move Attract or the ability Cute Charm. This status is unique as it can only affect a Pokemon of the opposite gender. An infatuated Pokemon will have a 50% chance to be down bad for the Pokemon it's in love with and not act. This does not wear off until one of the 2 Pokemon switch out. It is very situational and not really worth running the move Attract, especially in competitive, as you will very rarely know if the opposing Pokemon will be the opposite gender. And even if it is, it might not be the right matchup for your Attract user. Cute Charm definitely has its moments and can be useful on a handful of mons that wouldn't get more benefit from running other abilities, but overall, Infatuation is just not worth running, even though the actual effect isn't too bad. This will go into D tier for me. Now, we're gonna smack that all on the floor with Smackdown. While we're at it, smack that like button down, and might as well subscribe to the channel. This is some gene creaming content, and we have more coming throughout this new year, so hop on board. Smackdown is a condition that can only apply to non-grounded Pokemon. It allows them to be hit by ground type moves and affected by all grounded effects. This effect can be caused by the move Smackdown and Thousand Arrows. It is an alright effect, but mostly caused by Zygarde, as Thousand Arrows is a dummy OP move, while Smackdown is pretty weak and not worth the effort of running, at least competitively, due to the now grounded Pokemon still just being able to swap out and get rid of the effect. But I'll put this effect in C tier, carried heavily by Thousand Arrows. A way to become ungrounded is by being hit by the move Telekinesis. Telekinesis is a condition only caused from the move. It hurls a target in the air and will cause all moves, besides OHKO ones, to bypass accuracy checks to always hit. This effect lasts 3 turns, while also giving the affected Pokemon immunity to grounded effects. This is a really cool effect, but never worth it to run competitively, or even in-game. The effect isn't nearly good enough to use a move slot in turn on, especially since OHKO moves are unaffected. It might force a swap, but you are still giving up a turn to do it, so you don't really gain a net positive. I will sadly have to place this effect in F tier for competitive usefulness. Moving on to a more common condition, we have the disabled effect. This effect will disable the last move used by the affected Pokemon for 4 turns. This can be induced by the move Disable or caused by the ability Curse Body. This can be super useful, especially in combination with the move Substitute or against choice attackers who will be forced to swap or struggle. It isn't the most common effect, but definitely seen every here and there on certain Pokemon. I will give it a low B tier for usefulness to run. Now some of these I'm going to include seem borderline to me, but for the sake of consistency and fun, I will add them. I was kinda iffy on adding this next one, but what the hell, I'll throw it in here. It's for the Drowsy condition. This condition can be inflicted by using the move Yawn. A Drowsy Pokemon will fall asleep the next turn if not swapped out. Obviously, it's not as good as the sleep status condition it eventually inflicts, but it does have some utility to force switches and make your opponent often make a hard decision on which Pokemon they want slept, since you can spam Yawn on predicted switches. It's definitely better with entry hazards up, and you can send out a different Mon on the turn Yawn puts the inflicted Mon to sleep and take advantage of a guaranteed sleep turn. It also has very small advantages over Spore and powder based sleep moves that have a handful of counters. But other than these, it's a below average condition that is usually just mildly annoying. I will throw the Drowsy condition into low C tier. While we're on the topic of borderline conditions that I'm adding for the hell of it, we'll quickly cover the Powder condition. Powder is a priority status move that covers a target in powder for the remainder of the turn. If the powdered cover Mon uses a fire type move while covered, they will pretty much blow up instead of using the move and lose 25% of their max HP. While this seems like it could be a good condition with the priority and countering fire type moves, its complete lack of distribution and relatively low payoff makes it unseen and pretty unusable. This one is going into F tier, even though I really like the concept. Now we have a very good one you should all know in Leech Seed. Leech Seed can be inflicted to non-grass type Pokemon by the move Leech Seed. I ain't including Sappy Seed. Those Let's Go moves don't exist in my Pokemon canon. A seeded Pokemon will have about 12% of their max HP drained per turn. That sucked up HP will be transferred to the Leech Seed user or any replacement in that slot. It's a great tool for getting solid recovery while putting pressure on the opponent with the solid chip damage. So many Pokemon use Leech Seed as an annoying tool in combination with Protect and Substitute. It gives passive mons like Ferrothorn a pseudo recovery and offensive tool. I will throw Leech Seed into the A tier easily, being one of the better inflictions. Okay, onto a spooky one. We have Nightmare.
Nightmare.
Nightmare is a condition caused by, you guessed it, the move Nightmare. It's pretty unique as it can only affect a sleeping Pokemon or Kamala with its Comatose ability. This will cause the affected Pokemon to lose 25% of their max HP per turn they stay in while asleep. The effect itself isn't bad, but getting it to happen is tedious, difficult, and just not worth it, especially with the 3-turn max sleep counter now. You have to dedicate 2 move slots to this move and hope they stay asleep enough turns for it to do anything. Or in doubles, I guess you could have a Spore user mixed with a Nightmare Mon. But since you will likely just be able to deal more consistent damage and get more value out of another move, it isn't worth it to run. I will place Nightmare in the F tier for usefulness. Next we have the Ability Suppress condition. It can be inflicted by the move Gastro Acid, and even as a secondary effect of Zygarde's other signature move, Core Enforcer, if hitting after the target is moved. This essentially just makes it so the target has no ability as long as they are active. It affects virtually every ability, only not working on a handful, which are mostly form-changing abilities. In theory, it could be pretty useful to get rid of redirection abilities, Magic and Wonder Guard, Poison Heal, and some other really strong ones. But in practice, no one is dedicating a move slot and using turns on this effect that will just be switched out of if actually harmful to the opponent. I could see some use in game or as a secondary effect of a move like Core Enforcer, but a move actually good on their users. I will spare it from F tier and put it in D tier for competitive usefulness, as you could use it on an ally to get rid of detrimental abilities like Truant and Slow Start, which is very in your control. So definitely a niche move, but isn't totally ass competitively. I'm going to get into possibly the crown jewel of this list now. This is a new to Generation 9 condition, Salt Cure. Salt Cure is a condition inflicted by Garganacl's signature move, Salt Cure. It's a 40 base power rock type attack and causes the target to take 1/8 of their max HP and chip damage at the end of each turn. It also inflicts bonus chip damage when hitting a steel or water type mon, boosting the damage to a whopping 25% per turn. That's on par with Curse, and you don't even have to cut your HP in half. This differs from the trapping moves that also do chip damage, since it doesn't trap the inflicted mon. But even better, Salt Cure's effect will last even if the user has swapped out or fainted. This is pretty nutty because the trapping moves require the user to stay in, which can limit their effectiveness greatly, while Salt Cure pretty much will force a swap eventually with that continuous chip. I feel like it is a very big part of why a slow mono rock type mon can hang in OU so long, and this effect is going straight into S tier for me. Gotta cool off after that banger of an effect with the Imprison effect. Imprison is another one I was 50-50 on, but decided why not. Imprison is technically a self-targeting condition, but it affects all opponents and lasts as long as the user is active. What it does is seal any of the same moves the user has with the opponent. So if you have Flamethrower and use Imprison, any active opponent cannot use Flamethrower as long as the Imprison user is active. This has some decent applications, mostly in doubles where there are some very commonly used moves that you can restrict. These include Protect and Trick Room as perhaps the most notable, but my favorite use has to be the Trapping, Imprison, Transform, Mew that pretty much just forces the opponent to struggle after transforming into them. This will go high D tier, and I'm hoping for a single target attack that includes the Imprison effect, even if just for 2 to 3 turns like we got with Psychic Noise and the Heal Block effect. Now, while some rock types gained a signature condition that rules and made them viable competitively, another gained one that didn't know favors, to put it lightly. This is the Tar Shot condition. Tar Shot is a condition caused by the signature move of Colossal of the same name. When hit by Tar Shot, the affected Pokemon will have its speed lowered by 1 stage. But the effect I'm really talking about is how Tar Shot will double the effectiveness of fire type moves. This essentially gives a pseudo fire weakness to mons that are neutral to the typing, while adding additional weaknesses to already fire weak mons or lowering the resistance to mons that resist fire. It isn't a terrible effect on paper, as Colossal is a slow fire type, so making the opposition slower while weaker to one of your stabs is a pretty solid combo. But in practice, this move should never be considered competitively. You can essentially get the same effect out of clicking a fire type move twice, with bonus chances to activate additional effects and get crits. Also, the one mon with access to this move has so many other great tools it has to choose from, so there is never an open move slot for it unless you are hell-bent on making Tar Shot a thing. I will put this effect in F tier. Although if the speed lowering wasn't a stat drop and rather an effect of Tar Shot, it might have a case for D tier. An absolute killer in Metronome battles is next. This is the move Torment. Torment is a condition inflicted only by the move Torment. It prevents the affected mon from using the same move twice in a row. So they must select a different move each turn as long as they are active in the battle. This effect isn't terrible, since it can force choice users to struggle every other turn and take away some Pokemon's ability to function well. It is pretty much just outclassed by Taunt, Disable, and Encore, as they perform any task that Torment aims to fill better. But there's a reason you don't see it competitively. I will have Torment sit in the high D tier. 3 turns and you're done. These are the conditions when hearing Perish Song. The Perish Count condition is most famously induced by the move Perish Song, which will affect all active Pokemon besides ones with the ability Soundproof. It will cause them to faint after 3 turns if not swapped out. This can also be caused by Cursula's signature ability Perish Body, which will apply the effect to Cursula and a Pokemon that makes contact with it. Perish Song by itself isn't anything crazy, as you can simply just swap out of the effect, but when paired with Trapping, it's pretty nutty. Mons like Lapras and Azumarill can use trapping moves like Block and Whirlpool, and then Perish Song to eliminate more passive foes. In doubles, this strategy can be more reliably paired with a Shadow Tag user to cheese out some KOs while spamming Protect every other turn. Even without trapping, a Perish Song can force out an opponent that is set up and ready to sweep, or just be a win condition if activated against your opponent's last mon. I think all things considered, I'm gonna put this low B tier for usefulness, as it isn't the greatest strategy, but it can definitely just win you games or catch your opponent off guard and lose them mons. Next up is a pretty uncommon move a lot of you might not even know in Quash. Quash is a status move that causes the target to act last in that turn. Its effects obviously only make sense in doubles and is used as support to allow your ally to act before a faster opponent. This move has a decent distribution, being TM60 for 3 generations, but it really only makes sense to run on the prankster users who gain priority on it. This can be seen on Sableye and Murkrow and provides pretty solid support, not needing to set Trick Room to allow slow mons to thrive. It is a very specific condition that I wasn't even sure to include on here, but it sort of fits the criteria, so why not? We'll put this in C tier for competitive usefulness, as it is a very niche move that can only be reliable on a couple mons. Now here's a cool one you might not have thought of. I know it because I didn't at first until I asked the homie. It is for the Syrupy condition. This is caused by the move Syrup Bomb, which is exclusive to Dipplin and Hydrapple. This move is a relatively weak grass type attack, but also lowers the target speed by 1 stage at the end of each turn for the next 3 turns, provided the target is active obviously. Dripplin's sticky syrup may be enticing to want, but in reality, it isn't the greatest choice of move to run. The effect itself is decent, but it's a pretty inaccurate and weak move you would be better off replacing with something more powerful. If this was buffed to be a spread attack though, I could see it being tons more useful, as multiple speed drops can make a huge difference in VGC. But for now, I gotta put this effect in low D tier. Moving on, we have the Identified condition. This one is very specific, and I'm going to group it up with Miracle Eye, as it is essentially the same concept. From using the moves Foresight, Odor Sleuth, or Miracle Eye, you can remove certain type immunities. These 3 moves were removed in Generation 8's Dexit and Ghost type glazing if you didn't know, but I'm pretty sure it didn't affect most people's gameplay. Foresight and Odor Sleuth, when used against those pesky ghost types, will allow you to bypass their normal and fighting immunities. This will result in a neutral hit if the target is mono ghost, but if dual type, you will hit them based on their other typing's effectiveness. This can result in a super effective fighting attack in some cases, which is pretty cool, but competitively, I really only remember this move being used on Hitmontop to guarantee a rapid spin on incoming ghost types, trying to spin block it. Miracle Eye on the other hand is an even more obscure condition that removes dark types immunity to psychic. Could be cool in a playthrough, but if you want to hit dark types with your psychic type, just run Focus Blast. Wait. Never mind, Miracle Eye looking kinda good now. These moves also all have the effect of giving you the Keen Eye ability against the identified target. Well, kinda. You ignore the target's evasion stat changes, which makes it a nice anti-evasion tool. You know, a common thing to worry about in competitive settings. But I will give this effect a very low D tier, based solely on the fact that we have seen at least one mon use it as a serious part of its move pool for many generations. Embargo. Now this is an interesting one. The Embargo condition was introduced in Generation 4 and prevents the targeted mon from using their held item, essentially canceling their effects. This lasts for 5 turns and also prevents the trainer from using items from their bag in game. Now show of hands, who has seen Embargo used in a competitive match? Who has even seen or used it in game? It was even a pretty useless TM to use in-game, since most of the time the in-game trainers don't even have items. The only reason you might want to use it is because you didn't have any mons that could use Knockoff, an infinitely superior move that actually gets rid of the opponent's items. It's a pretty garbage move that I'm sure doesn't have a ton of support to be brought back, since it's been gone since Generation 8. This easily hits the F tier for competitive usefulness for me, dog. The last condition I'm going to cover is Encore. Strategically, of course. If you enjoyed this video, you should watch another from my playlist of similar style videos. Encore is a condition inflicted exclusively from the move Encore. It prevents the inflicted Pokemon from using any other move besides their most recent move once inflicted. It previously varied in length, being able to last anywhere from 2 to 6 turns when introduced, and crazily enough could last up to 8 turns in Platinum, Heart Gold, and Soul Silver. Imagine being locked into a move for 8 turns. Since Generation 5, Encore will always last for 3 turns, making it consistent but not overpowered. While it may not be seen as an amazing move to run on most mons, it certainly has a handful of good users. It is a lot more useful on fast Pokemon that can lock a passive mon into hazard setting, healing, or other support moves. Prankster mons like Whimsicott and Sableye love packing Encore as a safeguard against dangerous setup sweepers. Shell Smashers and Dragonacers will have to think twice about setting up, as you can swap in your Encore user on setup and perpetually lock them into it with priority. This obviously is great at forcing switches and gaining momentum, and while it can be played around, it is usually a really reliable move on the effective users. This one will go into low A tier for me. So here is the overall usefulness rankings from me and a recap of all the other status conditions in Pokemon. Which one of these is your favorite to use, and which one do you find the most annoying to deal with? My personal favorite has to be Curse, and most annoying to face definitely Salt Cure. If you enjoyed this video, you should check this one out next. And shout out to my YouTube and Patreon members. I really appreciate all of you. Thanks for watching, buds, and I'll see you in the next one.